Ladies and gentlemen of the crypto space, we're live on a Monday, November 17th at 4 p.m. A little late in the day, better than never. Better, better late than never. And obviously, busy day, but there's so much stuff going on that we still need to discuss the stuff that's going on. And it's a busy day in that world as well, with Bitcoin breaching $92,000 to the downside. People are running around pulling out their hair like their hair's on fire. They don't understand what's going on. And that is a very myopic inspection to have on such a grandiose and expansive market that is way beyond price. The the product is not the price. I've seen folks say that on social media. The product is the price, and that is the most disappointing thing, especially a person like me could ever see. It's the antithesis of everything that I talk about. The product is the price. This is a product that has no comparison. There's no precedence. There's products here that are unparalleled, incomparable. There's products here that deprecate, that displace, and that change the equation. And for folks to still, in this day and age, be saying the product is the price, um, is understandable. There's only so many people that listen to me, and if I had 200,000 people listening to me, it'd still be a minority, and everyone still wouldn't have the perspective that I have, or the perspective that far too few of people that listen to me have attained over these few short years. Product is the price. What a shame. It's a shame that this is where we are as a society. As a this is what people think. Um, Folks must reach deep to find depth and richness in everything. It's not just understanding these crypto markets; it's understanding how distorted and dystopian politics are, economics are, and then that obviously bleeds over into equity markets and crypto markets. You guys know me at this point. I'm cynical, and I'm probably cynical maximalist at this point. If it can be, if there can be a cynical perspective to be had, that is probably what I think is the case. I think politics is completely uh, an exercise of collusion, an exercise of corruption, um, uh, irrespective of anything you may hear out of a politician's voice. I don't, I literally do not trust first. I trust last, and that is unfortunate, but that's where we're at, and that is what gives me great comfort in these markets. There is no need for trust when capital is deployed to reasonable and rational destinations. Now, obviously, you'll have someone come from left field and talk about the rug pulls and the security incidences and the breaches and all the billions of dollars that are lost. And the first thing that I will say is that deploying capital and owning immutable deterministic protocols is exactly what cures that. The only what are the only two breaches? The balance of breach I had exposure to, capital loss from Contango. What else? What other breaches? Solidly was a mess when it launched, but that wasn't a tremendous capital loss. Um, it wasn't really a security incident. It was a failure out of the gate. I guess folks don't really want to hear me standing here say that I've been exposed to very few security incidents, if anything significant or meaningful at all. But that's because I would remind folks of my rigorous methodology of what I look for, what things uh, show me are show me meaning, and that's the determinism and the mutability, and that's why I focused in on things like curve, and especially nowadays with the talking points surrounding velodrome and aerodrome, the equation has changed. Um, yeah, it's not ironic, but um, a real aspect to Balancer was its governance complexities and its mutability. Not that their security incident was a manifestation of that at all, but that always kept me grounded, especially when Aura was popular for a bit, especially in 23, 24. Um, and I restrained myself. I wasn't comfortable with all of that conversation and government. It was too much. It was too much. We got to change this. This is getting changed. It was just too much. And when the protocol has less gears to less levers to pull, and things are more predictable, which is what determinism is. There's more consistency. There's more expectation of the same thing over and over again, and that's the epitome of what we're looking for. We want folks to engage with the protocols, perform financial activities, and for transactions to occur, and those transactions get distributed to us pro rata on a weekly basis. Rinse, repeat over and over again, deterministically. Deterministically means it's going to execute whether we want it to or not, because that's what the software is going to do. And nobody could change that because the contracts are immutable. They can't be changed. They're immutable. That's what immutable means, ladies and gentlemen. So I guess today's stream, the point of today's stream, which is the point of almost every stream, whether I explicitly state it or not, is that nothing has changed. Nothing changes with Bitcoin below 92,000. Nothing changes if Bitcoin does a mean regression down to 83,000. Things get a little sticky and a little uncomfortable if Bitcoin's rocking the weekly 200 down to 56,000. But it's still nothing changes. There's nothing you could do about it. And that's a position that I intentionally wanted to put myself in. There's nothing I could do about it. I have rules, and those rules I like to think are immutable. And I've reprogrammed my mentality to execute them in a deterministic kind of way. So I've had such great appreciation for how crypto changes the entire capital management equation that I've spent so much time and effort to psychologically reprogram myself to attempt to apply those very machine like rules to this human like brain. Now, obviously, there's emotions in the background, but over the last years, I've done pretty well at honing this skill. It's not divorcing yourself from emotions or divorcing yourself from the market. It's understanding this market activity for what it is. And frankly, this market activity is very simply described as people being absolutely stupid. The amount of capital that's deployed to equities and capital gains and trading, and look at the leverage, $200 million just got liquidated today in long positions. uh, 200 mil liquidated in the last 60 minutes. Listen, people are broken, and I take great pride in doing the exact opposite of what every single one of these people are doing. I want to be nothing like these people. I want to do everything different. And I want to be different than Bitcoin maximalists as well. The very shallow terminology called hodling, hold on for dear life, which is really dollar cost averaging, which is really what we do. Rule number one: own more assets. But in the past, I've had difficulty explaining the distinction between hodling and what we do, but I've attained a bit of a clearer understanding of how to describe the way I see it. The difference is richness. The difference is a story, which is consistent with dinner table investing. The difference is actually understanding what the fuck you're doing, having a comprehensive, robust understanding of what you're doing and why you're doing it, a strategy, a methodology, a procedure, a deterministic procedure. Because hodling seems shallow. It seems this deep. Like, I'm just going to buy and own more. Why? Why are you going to buy and own more? Oh, because they're debasing the currency. No, motherfucker, there's so much more to it. There's so much more to the story than they're just debasing the currency, because there's actually people out there, and there's the concept of business and the concept of productivity and the concept of products and services. So, how does all of this change because of these things like Bitcoin? Bitcoin does change the equation. And DeFi does change the equation. Why? How? If you don't understand that, how the hell can you be comfortable owning more assets? How in the hell can you be comfortable hodling if you don't understand what the hell you're doing? Unless it's just like blind faith or some shit. And blind faith has absolutely no business in capital management. That's what lands people owning Pulse Chain and shit. Blind faith and I don't know what. So I remind folks, especially on days like today, we own the right things in the right market, and you'll see equities do what they're doing, and you'll see random assets outperforming, and you're like, oh, I should have bought that. No, you should have bought the things that are going to change the system, the things that change the equation, the equation of capital management. Immutability and determinism should offer the most extraordinary peace of mind. I have no capacity to sell the things that are depreciating. And to me, when I hear that, I'm like, oh, thank God, I don't have another thing on my list to think about today. You have any idea how dense my calendar is between work and family and what I do with social media, what I do with capital management, and what I do with personal wellness and health? My day's packed. I don't want to be thinking, should I buy things or should I sell things? And my methodology has made that equation remarkably simple. Own more assets, rule number one. Know when to not buy assets, rule number two. Those assets better pay me, rule number three. And rule number four is don't neglect cash, because that means you can own more assets over time and you don't have to sell your cash receipts opportunistically, or you don't have to sell things that aren't entirely nailed down, like Bitcoin, which we deploy to yield basis. And that I think is a very reasonable allocation. And Bitcoin is a very reasonable component of the cash position, given that it has a capacity to be spent and has a capacity to be used as collateral. That is something that you don't necessarily want to do with your productive assets or your explicitly productive assets, your business ownership. That's something you want to do with something that's more liquid so that you can manage it or you have options and choices. So that's probably the extent of the options and choices that I want to consider. Is Bitcoin as part of the cash position and stable coins, but there's no leverage there. There's no risk of loss. Those are liabilities and those can be spent just as you can dollar liabilities on a credit card or a debit card or in a bank account, no different. And that's the equation that's super duper simple, especially on days like today. Hey, by the way, folks, I told you guys Curve CRVUSD would be third most popular stablecoin behind just behind Tether and USDC. And lo and behold, that's freaking crazy. $81 million worth of volume. How do you like them apples? Well, that's something to write home about. Talk about narrative validations on a day of volatility, sure, but this is so meaningful. there's a lot of stable coins and a lot of very big, important, meaningful pieces of tech, Frax, um, uh, oh my God, I'm long day. Liquidity, um, Dollar, a lot of stablecoin products. But look at where CRVUSD finds itself in a relatively short period of time because of the supply sinks, which is obviously yield basis at this point, in good part, and Llama Land, and just changing the equation. And we expect these equations to change as products, additional supporting projects, downstream projects, add robustness to these protocols, and as these markets mature. There's only two stablecoins really that I'm comfortable holding. Um, I never really held USDT. You can't really use it as put on a. I mean, nowadays markets are very fungible. Um, for instance, if you go to Spritz, you could pretty much top up with like anything. That's because I'm not even connected. That's because it's automatically sourcing liquidity. So you could pretty much top up with CRVUSD at this point. Of course you can. It'll automatically do the conversion. But USDT is directly redeemable. So there's a lot of protocols where USDT is $0 of fees. Um, on CipherCard, it's $0 fee for reloading with USDC. So I appreciate that and understand why, because those are directly redeemable for U.S. domestic bank deposits. USDT isn't necessarily, at least to the same extent as USDC. Um, so the only stable coins I'm really comfortable holding are USDC and CRVUSD. CRVUSD has just changed the equation in my mind. As much as I've had a high opinion of Frax, I've never really held a large amount of Frax. It is what it is, FRX USD at this point. Never held MIM, never held Dollar, never held them. The yield was always interesting, but it's not a game-changing product. A game-changing product is when you can put a quantity of these dollar products in your account and be like, all right, here's my dollars, here's my currency, here's my cash position. That changes the equation. People are becoming increasingly comfortable, and I think the data is going to show that more and more into the future. CRVUSD, I think, is going to just keep getting stronger and stronger and reinforce itself as the third most meaningful stablecoin behind USDC and USDT. I think that's inevitable and pretty obvious at this point. All right, whole market's taking a fat shit today. Aerodrome down at 78 cents. All technicals are crap. You're not going to find me coming out here saying there's anything supportive. Um, we've blown past levels. We've blown past MAs. Velodrome is at bottoms. Ethereum is barely at 3,000. Curve's down to 40 cents. Fine. The only thing that's probably at a decent level is Curve, which is this 39-cent level. So that's a pretty meaningful level of interaction dating back all the way to 2022. Okay, we'll see what it does. Tell me I don't have Aave. I don't have Aave up here anymore. I used to keep Aave up here. Um, Gold hovering at $4,050. That's a decent level. The weekly 10 MA. That's pretty constructive to look at right there. Equities marginally down for the day. Breaching, oof, that'll get the Fed and regulators pissing their pants a little bit. You breach that 10 SMA on the weekly, you're looking for a push maybe to 22,000. 2,500 point drop off of Nasdaq is going to get people pretty interested. That's 10%. That'd be a big retrace. Last time we saw a retrace like that was earlier this year, which very much makes COVID look like a little dip. Remember COVID and how everyone was pissing their pants? That's COVID. And in 2025, this year, that was a significantly larger retrace structurally, visually, and obviously we had a big dip between 22 and 23, which is the entire year. So January of 22 all the way until January of 24. That was a solid 2 years to get back if you bought the top in December of 2021. That was a nice retrace, though. Look at that. Look at that line. That's why do you think I have that $4,809 line there? Talk about a previous resistance, flip, support. That's looks lovely structurally, doesn't it? Just wild to see that play out. What do you got there on Bitcoin? We don't. You never had that retrace. I would have felt much more comfortable if we hit the 66,000 mark back in April of this year. I don't think we get there. I think we get to that 100 SMA on the weekly with an 84,000. I mean, we're right there basically. Why don't we wick there and just call it a day and just make everyone piss their pants? Because that's what everyone's going to do. Whether we get there or wick there, it doesn't matter. Everyone's still going to piss their pants. And that's exactly what markets do. And then everyone's gone. Then it's basically 2019 on repeat. And the only people remaining in the market are the people that actually own things because they have a thesis. They own things for a reason, or they own things because they have a different methodology. And the price is not the product for those people. Anyway, looks like that's about it from a technical standpoint. Let's do some commentary. Maybe we'll keep it short today. Appreciate all of you for coming on the afternoon. Arrow, much a pleasure. These are old comments, I remember. I will own more assets. I will own more cash flow. An incredible tool set in the mind of the captain has provided clarity to me for the rest of my life. Doesn't that make sense? 1% of the population owns 99% of the assets, or is it something like that? The 1% own 99% of everything. I remember earlier in my development of my philosophy, and that struck me. Like, all right, if they own everything, maybe I should buy some of it. And it was pretty simple because a lot of my realizations are about simplicity and how simple things really should be. So that was kind of obvious to me. If they own everything and I could actually buy this shit because I could go in equities, I could buy that. I tried that. I could go in crypto, I could buy that. I do that. I should probably buy this stuff. And that was the origins of rule number one, own more assets. The 1% own 99% of everything. Makes sense, right? Anyhow, Igor, hello, Captain. Much a pleasure. Much a pleasure. Peter Theo just sold all his Palantir and Tesla stock. Uh, uh, I don't know. I like Kathy Griffin, and I think Tesla goes much higher, but I think these prices and these assets are just fucking hot air and there's such bullshit. You had nothing for owning this. The only reason you're owning this is because you hope a bunch of other dumb motherfuckers buy it, drive up the price so you could dump on them and take their capital because that's what capital gains are. They're increasing the capital in an asset and you're extracting gains on that capital. It's literally just like a cash pot and you're putting your hand in. The first person to get their hand out wins. I can't stand capital gains mentality. I mean, the psychology of it literally drives me nuts. Now, the psychology of business and productivity and financial products and services, that rings true to me. That makes sense to me. That's sustainable to me. Um, so I just, when I think of what equities are that uh, don't even get me started on malemployment or broken employment or the amount of bullshit employment there, how shitty these businesses are run with regard to inefficiency. I can't even contemplate that anymore from an equity standpoint. Such wasted money that should be going into owners, and those owners should be are the people that own equities. So basically, people that own equities that don't get a dividend, they're just along for the ride and they're getting shafted by the business owners that actually get the cash flow. That's my opinion. And I know a lot of people like their buybacks and all that bullshit, but I don't subscribe to that mentality. I just don't. How much lower than the CME gap? I don't follow the gaps, but I know a lot of people do. I don't. Um, I think I go to MAs and levels and That's a decent level to start. Maybe you hit the 84,000 mark and then you wick down to some of these levels. I mean, 68, why not? There you go. You finally get your retrace. That would be a lower low, but I don't think we close there. Wick through the 100 SMA in the weekly, close at the 100 SMA in the weekly, and the wick hits right into all-time highs in 21. Why not? You finally get your retest, previous resistance to flip support. Why not? That's In fact, that would be quite comforting. And then you end the year at like 130,000. You wouldn't be able to make that shit up if it played up like that. Not that it matters. No idea. No idea. But you can imagine my opinion on um, relatively artificial references, CME gaps and whatnot. It doesn't matter. It's all a bunch of hot air and bullshit that people like to compare to see if they're right or wrong. And follow rule number one, and everyone will have a much simpler day. What's up, bro? DJ Kato in the house. Much a pleasure. Sacrifices, eminent sacrifices are. It's an interesting statement. Well, the sacrifice, right? Okay. Sacrifice is a big deal. Time. We sacrifice time to better ourselves, to better our capacity, to better our family. Sacrifice time for money has got to be the worst thing to sacrifice, right? VCRV still not getting the lion's share of fees as a result of CRV USD usage on yield basis, though. No, most go to VEYB. I don't know. We'll see what plays out. At this point, from vote rentals, I'm accumulating some yield basis, nowhere near the size of my VCRV exposure. Whatever. I think it's all good. I am generally a perpetual optimist, and I think owning the base layer makes the most sense to me. And if I had the capital to have reasonable yield basis exposure, I think that'd be a decent exposure too. Uh, I think in the end, there'll be a lot of folks that do have plenty of capital. There's tremendous amount of currency out there, and yield basis will be bought. And at some point, those vote rentals will find their way back to DECRV in the vote market, and there'll be plenty of cash flow there from yield basis. So yield basis success bleeds over into vote rentals, and just it's all synergistic, and that's my sentiment. Um, and I just focus on the base layer. I think it makes the most sense to me. I mean, what is there other than curve that's entrenched as such a fundamental utility that is the five businesses of crypto? I mean, we have the aerodrome narrative, which is ginormous. Got to be, it may even be a bigger narrative than curve, but it's not. It's not the five businesses of crypto. It's not a dollar product. It's not the biggest business in crypto. It may be a bigger narrative because crypto is obsessed with the concept of trading and capital gains and all this bullshit waste of time to earn as much money in a shorter period of time as possible and not do things over reasonable time frames. There used to be honor in working and for something over a decade or 2 decades and saving and accumulating. Everyone wants to get rich quick. It's such bullshit. I think having a 12-year plan is quite reasonable, especially, God, if you're in your 20s, a 12-year plan is quite reasonable. Longer. If I'm in my 40s, if I would to go back and yell at myself in my 20s, I'd be like, "You dumb motherfucker, Captain. You prepare for your 40s." Doesn't that make sense? So, but everyone's like, "Oh, I want to live my life in my 20s." Yeah, in your 40s, you're gonna wish you prepared in your 20s for your 40s. That's God's honest truth right there. Um, D, any idea when yield basis would be open for deposits again? It seems like it got filled within minutes. Yes, it is filled, filled, filled. Michael just wants to expand to a bill. So probably in the next weeks, probably in a month or so after a couple of governance proposals. That makes sense. But they'll probably get filled really quickly again. So um, And I don't think it's going to expand to a bill right away. He wants to roll it out because it needs to scale. It needs to scale the vote rentals, to scale the liquidity depth for CRVUSD. Everything needs to scale. So I think they're moving the right levers and heading in the right directions. And generally speaking, that is comforting enough to say. I got a short for insurance. Okay, insurance is always good. I don't short, I don't long. I rather sit on the lounge chair in the backyard in the sun and not have to think about shorts or longs. Insurance is a decent concept. Um, Folks would argue that I'm deficient by not considering it, and I would argue probably that it's a luxurious position. It's a position of privilege that I don't have to think about a short. But that privilege is afforded because of my methodology. And my methodology tells me I don't have to make as much gains as possible. I don't make any gains. I make cash flow, but I don't have to earn as much as possible. I just need to stick to my process. And in the coming years, my process will reward me. Time is my friend. Time does the work, not additional strategic positions or strategies, long and short, and taking a gamble, a 10 to 1 odds that something works out. That's not for me. Be careful. Leverage is a hell of a drug. Dean's in the house. Much pleasure. Appreciate you. Does Zero offer any cash flow? No. I thought they were turning on the fee switch, though. You see what happens when folks have to turn on a fee switch? Where's the fees? Where's the cash flow? XYZ, ladies and gentlemen, is such an incredible equation. How much does it cost? How much is it paying? And what is the likelihood it continues to pay in the future? Let's see where Uniswap goes. Do they turn on the fee switch? I don't know. This is why I absolutely um, love the MetaDex concept and the drones and Curve. It just pays every week. Let's see what happens with Kingdom this week. I'm quite curious. I would very much welcome some additional capital flows, especially in this period of austerity with cash flows declining. A little bit of extra flows won't hurt. And Lord knows that Arbitrum Ramses was painful. So let's see what Hyperliquid Ramses does instead. Buying Ethereum dips with YCRV and slavery cash flow relentlessly. Good morning. Listen, own more assets, and over time, and those assets survive and thrive. You will thank yourself in a couple of years that you bought those assets, and that's all you can do. And in a couple of years, if you bought the right assets and you diversified well, then we made good decisions, and we will be prosperous because of it. Rule number one is the only way to make it with the currency debasement, as everyone calls it. But that is still, as much as I loathe general public talking points, it is a reasonable statement. Like the Kobayashi letter talks very nicely about things like that. Like Japan is about to just blow it out the water with printing, so they're debasing the crap out of their currency. 35-year low, wild. And if you don't own assets, you will be left behind. So that's where we're at, but that's encompassed in my rules. So you don't have to think about debasement. You don't have to think about QE, not QE, whatever the hell is the popular talking point of the week. Just follow the rules. Own more. Why? Because the 1% own 99% of everything. So I should probably own more assets. When? Over time, as I have capital. I should balance my budget. Fortunately, I'm at the point where I don't have to buy assets all the time because I'm 40,000 years old and I've been doing this for a long time. And there was a period of time when I was younger and I was like, what should I buy? How much should I buy? How much should I spend? And now I'm much more further along in my process where I've accumulated assets. So if you're in the process of accumulating assets, you're not necessarily thinking like me. You're much more in rule number one, own more assets. And these are, when do you want to own them? When prices are at a discount. Okay, prices are down. But If you're in your 20s, you're probably buying where prices are down and prices are up because you're dollar cost averaging. So don't think about the price too much. In if you're 5 years into capital management, you could probably afford a little bit of extra time to think about rule number two. Rule number two, know when to not buy assets. So that's a bit of a luxury. That means you probably have assets, and now you're strategically not buying assets when they're too expensive. You want to wait for them to be at a discount. Okay, good stuff, Ian. Good stuff. You mentioned Pulse Chain. RH has a new sacrifice launch this week. Oh, let's see how that plays out. I know. New York City sarcasm. Oh, what a disaster in New York City. You saw this? Uh, Hochul wants to increase taxes. I mean, who lives there? I don't. That's saying that from New Yorker. You guys can tell from my accent, maybe. I'm a New Yorker. Fuck that. You get the hell out of there. That's some Snake Plissken shit right there. You understand? You ever see Escape from New York? Okay, get the hell out of there. If you can, you leave. You leave states that are taxing you. You leave states that want to take your capital and give it to other people. Get out because it doesn't stop. It gets worse. You leave, evacuate, and that's the only rational thing to do. Can't take the boy anywhere. Periods like this remind me why I'm glad cash out all yield. Yeah. Now I haven't done. Interestingly enough, I haven't cashed out in 2 months, so cash flow has been down. But I have cash saved up from obviously earlier this year. So I'm in a position of luxury that I have cash and I'm not a forced seller, so I don't have to claim. That means I can claim in the next 6 months. And clearly, I'm going to have to wait a little bit of time because I don't want to claim depreciated assets. I want to wait for Ethereum to be 5,000, and I can afford to wait. I don't need the cash right now, but that's a good point. There's periods of time where you claim every week and cash out every week. There's periods of time where you could delayed delay the claim, and that's reasonable too. That's probably as strategic as I get, ladies and gentlemen. Do I claim now or do I claim later? I like to prepare for the future. I'm starting to get real interested in growing a garden. That sounds lovely to me. Maybe some bees for honey and chickens for eggs, goats for milk, steak from the butcher. Now, I have a dream to be off grid solar. That would be lovely. Ah, would have been lovely. That's a long story, and I'm not going to clarify. I had it, it was in the cards at one point, but it didn't work out, and too expensive for what they wanted. I I wanted that solar roof so bad, but they wanted like 200 grand for it, and it was just not going to happen. What a shame. Anyway, that's a long story. Cap, I'd like to hear about your journey with peptides, how and why you started, which peptides. I'm not going to digress too much, but generally speaking, health is paramount. Now, first and foremost, when I started to understand mitochondrial peptides, that's a big deal. You want your energy to be there. And how do I talk about this without mentioning particular peptides? But get your mitochondrial in order. You want your cells to have a capacity to produce energy. That's a big deal for performance, obviously, when exercising, and that leads to proper metabolism, digestion, weight loss, sleep, all the good stuff, well-being, etc., etc. So you need your mitochondria functioning well. And what is there? There's three interesting peptides for that. You got the MOTS, and then you got so the MOTS is first and foremost. What does that make? That makes new mitochondria. Um, all right, fine. A couple of words of wisdom. So the MOTS you take until you have and until you don't feel the buzz anymore. Folks say you get a buzz from it. I don't feel nothing. So my mitochondria are good to go. But I get a kick out of that SS31. So that's like a antioxidant type thing. It gets into the mitochondria and fixes it from the inside. So I like that because I like CoQ10 and ubiquinol and stuff like that. And the concept of antioxidants means a lot. So that's the type of thing you don't feel, but you know works. So I like that SS31. Then you got that, what, 5 amino 1 MQ type stuff. That's cool. Suppresses the NNMT. So it gets, because that plays into NAD plus. That plays into your body's capacity to produce NAD plus. That's cool stuff. So NMN, and you can get NMNH straight on Amazon. And then the 5 amino 1 uh, gets your body producing more NAD plus by itself. So that's pretty cool. So I like the peptides. It's a big deal. And then it's just a rabbit hole from there. But obviously, I mentioned mitochondria because that's energy, and energy is a big deal. So then you got a whole rabbit hole of nootropics and stuff like that. That's another rabbit hole. And then you got the whole GLP craze. That's a big deal. And you got what muscle building and what the IGF peptides. But it's a very expensive rabbit hole. So keep it simple and always do your research. Now with AI nowadays, you can do extensive research, tremendous amount of research capacity out there. But the most important thing is your health and wellness. What are you if you don't have energy to go to the gym? What are you if you don't sleep well or you don't digest food well? What are you if you're overweight and sluggish and tired and lethargic? What's the point of all this? So these are great questions to have a conversation with AI, and for folks, everyone individually have to figure out these things on their own, and what's good for them or right for them. Um, in the end, it's not really a complicated topic. It's just a topic that people don't know about, a topic that people need to investigate and become professionals at it to take care of themselves. That's my opinion. Um, What peptides have appealed to? Would you start earlier? Yes, man. If I was smarter, younger, I would have been healthier in my 30s. I was very unhealthy in my 30s. I worked too much, worked too hard, but then again, look, I wouldn't have had some of the financial opportunities I've had if I didn't work as hard as I did in my 30s. I killed myself in my 30s. I used to work in Manhattan and live on Long Island, and it was a 2-hour commute each way. I did that for 8 years. That was very painful. Those commutes were painful. I watched my oldest daughter. I saw her in the mornings when I would drop her off at daycare, and by the time I got home, she was sleeping. I mean, she was young. It's like 4 and younger. I pretty much missed like the first 4 years of her life. For what? What? The sacrifice. This is like what Mix was saying. Sacrifice. That was my sacrifice. That's my creed. My sacrifice. That's what I did. But you can only sacrifice so much, and there comes a point where now you have to sacrifice other things for your health and wellness. Get to the gym every day, get to the damn sauna every day, proper hydration. Yeah, check out on Amazon that LMNT. That is the most insane hydration. I've learned so much about hydration, and that hydration is so important once you get it older and you're like on TRT, and you got to watch your RBCs and your hematocrit and whatnot, and your blood and thickness and whatnot. Proper hydration is so critical. So many people are walking around dehydrated. It's crazy. So, and it's just the antithesis. Uh, what do I mean? It's the antithesis of what everyone thinks. Doctors like, you high blood pressure. You got to watch your sodium. Okay, no, you're probably overweight. You got to drop 30 pounds, and then that'll fix up your blood pressure. And then you got to hit the sauna, so you got to move your fluids, and it's going to get you dehydrated. So you got to get in, a gallon of water, 120 ounces of water, and 5 grams of sodium, and 4 grams of potassium, and 3 grams of magnesium. So you're not, how are you going to get that? Those are tremendous numbers. But if you're overweight and you're retaining water, that those amount of electrolytes aren't going to do anyone good. Why are you retaining water? Probably just excess adipose tissue. Visceral fat. Anyway, complicated topic, but don't neglect your health. By the way, I'll stick my neck out. Dromos, the Dromos, a big deal, boys and girls, in my opinion. Talk about immutability and determinism, and they really tick all the boxes in the most absolutely insane way. Like I've had this conversation with you guys for years, and they really tick all the boxes. It's like, whoa, pay me. How much? All your money. That's what they do. They give me all their money. I'm like, "Oh my god, that's exactly what I've always wanted. Just pay me what you owe me. Pro rata. I own 1% of the company. Pay me 1% of the money the company makes." Pretty simple equation. And guess what? They fix the business because get the people out of the business. There's no people in the business. There's no humans. It's all software. Deterministic immutable software. I mean, they blow my mind with all the check boxes. They literally tick all the check boxes in the most insane way. The drones feel super scammy and replace tech for BS marketing. Very bearish long term, seems to me. Coinbase is heavy wash trading. Well, they arbitrage and they probably run their arbitrage through their centralized arbitrage through the on-chain books. Um, no, I don't agree. It's not about marketing. Um, it's about they fix business. They fix forex markets. They get the people out of it. They fix the problem with human resources. And the problem with human resources, ladies and gentlemen, is the humans. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, look at these businesses, these companies out there with too many employees and nobody with experience. And it's just, why are you paying these people? Uh, I mean, I know people need to have jobs and salaries, but no, fuck no. From an investor standpoint, you don't need 90% of your staff. You replace it with software that'll do the same job every second of every day on repeat deterministically. That's how you make an efficient system. I'm an efficiency maximalist. And if you want to fix the system, you want to fix this fucking planet, you got to get people out of the way of business and finance and let people become professionals in things that people really need to be professionals at. You don't need people doing bullshit jobs. You need people doing jobs that are meaningful and specialized, my opinion. I got myself to Florida too. God bless. This state is lovely. Of all the states in this country, I'm very comfortable down here in Florida. I think they get it right. I mean, no state income tax. Now, now bear in mind, that's a whole complicated topic, taxation, like for what's regressive taxation and whatnot, like sales tax. That hits everyone, whereas property tax only hits the boomers and the people that own property. So I don't know. I am a fan of sales tax because that limits consumption. And I think people consume too much. And I think if you have a capacity to restrain consumption and to save and accumulate capital for investing purposes, now you have a choice. But if you don't have a capacity to avoid tax because you own a property or the other reasons you're paying taxes, then you don't have the option. You're forced to pay the tax. But if the taxes are paid via sales tax, you do have the option. See what I'm saying? So that's my opinion. That's what I think. My man. D, any other good places to make Bitcoin collateral productive? No. And we're still out on yield basis. It's brand new. Now I have my comfort level with CRVUSD, but my comfort level is increasing with yield basis. It's getting there. It was enough for me to deploy merely because it's Michael's software, and I think he is a different level, a different breed of developer. Um, yeah, but there's no other place like it than yield basis. But it's still out. It still needs to grow. It's still in descent. It's still just starting. It's going to take some time to see what it's capable of. Buying stables and farming with those, you could always do the leverage, the carry trade. Eh, you're not, listen, if you could leverage 5% into 20% and you're playing around with $1 million, and instead of 50 grand, you're making 200 grand. Those are meaningful numbers. But if you're taking 5 grand and instead of $50 a year, you're making $500 a year, is it worth it? A lot of where you're at is probably, is it worth it? And most of the time, it's not. Hope that helps. Good morning, Cap. Fellow Long Islander, Huntington. Yeah, I was Plainview for a bit, and then stayed in Plainview for a year. I lived in Roslyn Heights for a little bit. That was nice. We lived on the me and my family, with my mother in Florida, my mother and father. May they rest in peace. We lived on the outskirts of Port Washington for a bit. The townhomes. We rented an apartment out there for a little bit. That was quiet. I was young. I was doing pizza delivery out there back then. Those were fun days. Those boys in those big homes in Sands Point, those were cheap motherfuckers. That's what they were. Long Island Railroad. Long Island Railroad. I didn't drive. Long Island Railroad to the subway. And when I lived in Plainview, I had to go to Jamaica. So I had to transfer Long Island Railroad. Then to get to Penn Station to hit the 139 downtown. Oh goodness. I worked on 770 Broadway. I worked on 250 Hudson. I worked on Wall Street for a bit, Brown Brothers Harriman Building, which is basically Wall Street and 7th Ave, Psh, New York City. I worked in One Penn Plaza for a year. That was cool because I would take the train and I would go to Penn Station and go right upstairs. That was pretty cool. That was fun. That's a story. Um, my man, the wash trading line is dated. It's arbitrage trading, lots of fees involved, not insiders buying and selling. Yeah, it's arb. They're arbitraging their centralized exchange with on-chain liquidity. They want everything. Why would they want to manage from a DevOps perspective, server infrastructure, and centralized equipment? Why would they want to manage any of that? Coinbase eventually wants everything on chain. Why? Get rid of it. You don't need the servers. You don't need the once you have the developers, they're running it's all contracts. And frankly, once Aerodrome is what it is, it's all Aerodrome and call it a day. And now all Coinbase needs to do is be an owner of Aerodrome, and that's it. Fascinating. Isn't that an interesting that seems so interesting to me, and that seems so obvious to me. They just pipe, just Coinbase all of a sudden they just accumulate, and they're buying more and more of Aerodrome, and then they just pipe all their business from their centralized platform into Aerodrome and call it a day, and they're just generating money, and they run no servers. That just seems obvious to me, like as a destination. I hope. I sure as hell hope so. Oh, Hype VM, they're doing something? I don't know. I don't keep up with it all, but I hope they're doing something. Mev, XRAM. I hope so. I sure as hell would love cash flow comparable to Arrow and Velo. So the curve is predominantly my cash flow, and then Arrow Velo, and um, I would hope that one of the kingdoms gives me something because what are we getting from EtherX and Shadow at this point? I would love something comparable to Arovelo to come out of the kingdom once again. That would be nice, especially until markets turn around. Good times. Much a pleasure. Much a pleasure. The Mevbots. Ladies and gentlemen, 4:53 p.m. on a Monday, November 17th. Thank you for joining me in this late afternoon session. I appreciate it. I know it was a little delayed, but it was a busy day at the office. I probably have to look at my Slack anyway to see if anyone's pinging me. A couple of things I needed to finish up. But I wish you all a good week. Stay calm, cool, and collected. Follow the rules. The 4 rules, you know what they are. And don't think too much. Don't worry about it. These markets are going to drive everyone away, but these markets, nothing has changed. They've changed the equation. Immutability and determinism changes everything about business. See you guys and gals on Friday. Until then, peace.